Last night we got word that the feds were seizing data from Republicans who had supported Donald Trump in 2020, and that the DOJ would be issuing subpoenas to several of these state individuals as well. We're now seeing that the feds have raided the home of a Donald Trump era Department of Justice official. Okay. These are really dark times, my friends. This is political civil war. It is escalating to an extreme degree. And we just saw in Texas, the GOP issued a statement that they do not view Joe Biden as legitimately elected. I'm not going to sit here and talk to you about who's right or who's wrong. You can make up your mind on that. No, my view on this is just, let's be real. The country is being gutted and ripped apart. Now, many people on the left, they're publicly saying that we must hold Donald Trump to account for what he did in 2020, that he must be prosecuted for January 6, 2021. But secretly and passively, many of the more prominent left figures, Democrat establishment figures, point out the goal of what they're doing is just to stop Trump from running again. That's it. That's it. In an op-ed for the Washington Post, one individual writes, if the reason we're doing this is because we're just trying to stop Trump, there's an easier way to do it. Just pass a resolution through Congress that he can't do it. I think it's fair to say this is not about any crimes committed by Donald Trump. Now, of course, there are many on the left that'll try and claim that. Sorry, I don't believe you. Because what we're seeing flies in the face of what Democrats themselves were saying when Donald Trump threatened to arrest Hillary Clinton. They, it's dangerous. You can't do that. Now they're going for it. They just don't want Donald Trump to win again. Probably because Trump's an outsider, because Trump was a disruptive force, because he wasn't supposed to win. What do they call him? The Pied Piper candidate? They thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. It was her turn, and then she did not. And now as more people come out and say they support Trump, the more we see the pushback from the establishment, from the intelligence agencies, and the worse things get. A DOJ official for Trump having his home raided. Now, look, if these people committed crimes, well, then so be it. Right now, innocent until proven guilty. We'll see how these things play out. But I've been reading quite a bit about the Civil War, and I think history rhymes. For obvious reasons, it's not the same. But I'm seeing more than enough, in my opinion, to suggest we're getting closer and closer to that point. I don't even know what to say. I mean, look, there was some good news today in the Supreme Court struck down some gun control legislation in New York, and the left is losing their mind over it. But all that's really happened now is it's exacerbated the political divide. In reading about the timeline in the lead up to the first American Civil War, they actually point out that there was a very different perspective. The world views of the southern states and the northern states were just so at odds. John Brown's a good example. I mean, by any accounts, the dude killed people. But in the South, they said he was a terrorist. He was murdering people. He was trying to trigger a race war. In the North, he was an abolitionist hero. But the reality is, John Brown just straight up killed people. It's tough. I mean, slavery was abhorrent. It was evil. And so you had someone who said, nope, not taking it anymore. The left likes to prop up John Brown, thinking that they would be like him. I don't think so. I think the reality is every faction throughout history, they have their individuals that engage in violence. But when you lose, you're a murderer. When you win, you're a martyr. Well, if you win and then die, I guess, or you die while trying to win. The point is, the North won, and rightly so. But the things the North did in order to win are horrifying. You take a look at Maryland. They arrested 31 members of the state assembly because they supported secession. They just came in and did it. D.C. didn't like the fact that Maryland was a slave state and they'd be surrounded, and they needed a passage to guarantee armaments to the North to defend D.C. So they said, suspend habeas corpus from D.C. up to Pennsylvania, which basically meant in Maryland. Arrest anyone who opposes us, and even the politicians. In fact, Lincoln tried to arrest a sitting Supreme Court justice. Crazy days indeed. Abraham Lincoln justified it saying, effectively desperate times call for desperate measures. Is this what they're saying? Look, it seems like and I'll say this in my opinion, they're trying to trigger civil war. Because if What would they be doing differently if it was obvious? If they outright said, we want to do this, what would they be doing differently? Let's read the story. Take a look at the escalation. It's getting crazy. Before we get started, my friends, head over to timcast.com and become a member to help support our work. As a member, you'll get access to exclusive segments from the Timcast IRL podcast Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. Not family friendly, uncensored. Good conversations, though. Often very funny. You'll also be supporting our journalists. We just hired a couple more. We're planning to expand. We're planning on putting together some documentaries, but man, documentaries are very expensive. So we'll have to figure that one out. But with your support, the more people who sign up, we'll be able to do this. We want to do documentaries on gun control, on the Federal Reserve. So I'll say, in order to do that, we really do need your support because these things can be really expensive, like six-figure budgets. You got to fly to like 15 states. Could take like 6 months to produce, but we really want to expand. So we need your support. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show. Let's read the first story from the Rolling Stone. Feds raid the home of DOJ official Trump wanted to elevate to help overturn election. They say I'm choosing the Rolling Stone on purpose, so, keep in mind the framing. Federal authorities on Wednesday raided the Virginia home of former Trump Justice Department official Jeffrey Clark as part of the Justice Department's investigation into the push to overturn the results of the 2020 election. News of the raid was reported Thursday afternoon and confirmed by a U.S. Attorney's Office spokesperson. Clark is a key player in Trump's effort to leverage the Justice Department to help him stay in office. Investigators believe Clark may have used his former position as Assistant Attorney General for the Environment and Natural Resources to persuade election officials in battleground states to change their state's results in favor of Trump, according to the New York Times. In December 2020, Clark helped draft a letter to Georgia Governor Brian Kemp baselessly claiming that the Justice Department had identified significant concerns about election results in Georgia and advised Kemp to create a separate slate of Electoral College electors supporting Donald Trump. All right. I'm not here to argue in favor or against Trump. I think the January 6th narrative is completely political. That's why there's no cross-examination and it's non-adversarial. But I'll put it this way. Regardless of what I think, you have one of two scenarios occurring. In one scenario, Donald Trump tried to stage a coup to overturn a legal election to steal power. And Donald Trump is still the dominant force in the GOP and is polling favorably to win in 2024. Trump supporting politicians are still winning. If that is what you believe happened, certainly you must believe we are escalating towards some kind of civil war, no? Or fascist dictatorship. The other scenario, Donald Trump did not try to stage a coup. And during a contested election period, arguments were being made in the courts and key officials were suggesting people continue those arguments. And for this, Democrats, the establishment, are using the power of the federal government to destroy and shut down anyone who supported Trump. Pick your narrative. I'm not going to tell you which one to pick. Just pick one. Either way, we are looking at some kind of civil war or takeover of this country, dissolution of its founding values, a very serious constitutional crisis. Rolling Stone continues. Trump allegedly considered naming Clark Attorney General after Bill Barr, after he resigned. Acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen refused to go along with the big lie. It's a political term. I'm not surprised Rolling Stone's using it. Trump dropped the plan to elevate Clark after Rosen, acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue, and Steve Engel, the former Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Legal Counsel, all threatened to resign. Russ Vought, president of the Center for Renewing America, where Clark is a fellow, tweeted that Clark's home was searched in a pre-dawn raid on Wednesday and that the former DOJ official's electronic devices were taken as he was put in the street in his PJs. News of the raid broke hours before Rosen, Donahue, and Engel are set to testify at the January 6th committee's fifth hearing later on Thursday. The hearing is expected to cover Trump's effort to corrupt the Justice Department into overturning the election. Clark was subpoenaed by the committee last year but refused to comply. The committee voted to refer Clark for contempt charges. He eventually sat down with the committee but reportedly invoked the Fifth Amendment repeatedly. So he pleads the Fifth. He gets raided. On Wednesday morning, federal agents served multiple subpoenas to individuals who agreed to participate in the schemes by Trump campaign to secure a slate of fake electoral college electors in an effort to keep President Trump in power despite his loss in the 2020 presidential election. I want to show you this op-ed. It's from today. It's from this morning. Opinion from Edward B. Foley. There is a better option to keep Trump out of office than prosecution. He writes, if the goal of prosecuting former President Trump is to protect American democracy from a Trump comeback in 2024, there is a better way to go about it than filing criminal charges. Instead, Congress should exercise its constitutional authority to prohibit Trump from seeking the presidency again. And that's the only paragraph you needed to hear. It is entertained in the political class that the goal of the prosecution is not to seek justice. It is to prevent Trump from being president. And he even goes on to state, all we got to do is say you can't be president. And that's it. And then you're satisfied? So you mean to tell me that what they're doing to Trump's officials and to the GOP is not about justice or criminal activity? It's about preventing Donald Trump from staging a comeback. Okay. At the very least, they're entertaining the possibility that is the case. It's quite shocking, isn't it? In the Washington Post, that's their position. At the very least, that is a possible reason why they're doing it, and they should consider just barring Trump from running anyway. Now, that's something else, isn't it? Here's a tweet someone responded to me. So I tweeted the story saying, LOL Civil War. And this Twitter account, Societal Pillage, made me laugh for a good 20 minutes. I'm exaggerating, by the way, but it's funny. It is the frog with the scorpion on his back who says, but now we shall both surely drown, said the frog. LOL, said the scorpion, LMAO. I suppose you need to know the parable of the scorpion and the frog to get why this is hilarious. In the actual story, the scorpion asked for a ride. The frog says, why would I give you a ride? You'll sting me. The scorpion says, I wouldn't sting you. I'll drown. If I do, we'll sink. And the frog says, good point. Let's go. And then halfway across the water, the scorpion stings the frog. And he says, but now we will both surely drown. And the scorpion says, but it is in my nature. Something to that effect. I think there's similar stories to that. LOL, said the scorpion, LMAO. I see this as hilarious, but it feels like, when we say, hey, what you're doing is burning everything to the ground, and their response is LOL. It seems like they just don't care. It gets worse. Take a look at this from timcast.com. The FBI seizes cell phone of Nevada Republican Party chairman investigating efforts to undermine the Electoral College. There's more. They issued subpoenas on Georgia GOP chairman as fake elector probe grows. Truly amazing. From The Atlantic, October 10th, 2016. Trump's promise to jail Clinton is a threat to American democracy. You bet it is. But that's all it was. It was bloviating. It was Trump just talking. Once Trump got elected, he was like, nah, I'm not doing that. A lot of people got mad. But he was like, I'm not doing that. Well, here we are. I believe the most likely scenario is that they don't want Trump to run again, so they're using criminal prosecution to go after him. And it's kind of scary. August 4th, 2020. U.S. election war game sees states ready to secede if Trump is sworn in. An election war gaming exercise conducted amid the fears of counting chaos resulted in 3 states threatening to secede and the military being asked to help decide the winner. This is a war game. Basically like, a bunch of prominent Democrats and establishment Republicans played D&D. That's basically what they did. In it, some suggested that should Donald Trump actually win, the West Coast should secede from the Union. That doesn't mean they will, but I think it's a real possibility. I really do. If you just take a look at the timeline of the first Civil War, Trump threatening to jail Clinton if he wins election, I thought that was bad, but he didn't actually go forward with it. We have this from Daily Voice. New poll reveals percentages of Americans who want to secede by region. I've talked about this several times. I bring it up again to make the point. I took the state populations, combined the regions, broke down the percentages by politics, basically normalizing for population. 37.2% of people favor their region breaking off to form their own regional union. I don't know if that means civil war. They call it support for secession. The point is, it's large. And what you need to understand is, among the younger generation, it's a lot higher than the older generation. So when they say 37.2, it is not that a third of the boomers, a third of the millennials, a third of the Gen Xers. No, it's actually 80 to 90% of the boomers say no to secession. 80 to 90% of Gen Xers say no to secession. And then half of millennials and half of Gen Z. The polls show that younger people tend to heavily favor secession and civil war. Maybe because the system hasn't been working for them. Maybe because they're more radicalized. But I bring this up in the context of what's happening with the federal government going after Donald Trump, his former staff members, and it's going to get worse. I have to wonder why. It's been a year and a half since Trump's been out of office, and they're only now raiding his former officials in the GOP. I think it's weird, isn't it? Maybe it's all political. Here's an article from Wikipedia. I've been reading the timeline of the Civil War, and a couple of these provisions stood out. I'm not going to read through everything, but they talk about compromise, lawsuits, escalation of violence. John Brown. They say December 2, John Brown is hanged in Charlestown, Virginia, now West Virginia. Across the North, it is treated as a national calamity. Church bells are rung, rallies are held. Brown is seen as a martyr to the cause of ending slavery. In the South, he's seen as a fanatical Yankee abolitionist trying to start a bloody race war, as well as stealing property. Well, they were wrong about they thought it was their property, but these were people. The reaction in the North to his execution reinforces the Southern fear that more such raids would soon be coming. Secession, for which support had grown steadily since the nullification crisis of 1832 and 33, is believed by Southern leaders to be their only option. History does not repeat itself, but surely it does rhyme. In 2020, the far left rioted across this country, causing billions of dollars in damage and resulting in several dozen people dying. The federal government did nothing. I mean, some people got charged. Kamala Harris helped support raising bail money to get some of these people out of jail. Joe Biden's staffers directly funded some of this, sending a wave of concern among Republican states and the voting population that powerful special interests will protect those who are overtly committing crimes in the name of their ideology. It's not too dissimilar. John Brown was a violent murderer. It's a tough call. I don't like the violence, but I do like the abolitionist movement. I like the fact that he said enough, we're ending this very serious evil activity. But I'm not a fan of just going and killing people like he did. I think that's wrong. So it's tough. Yeah, I'm a centrist. How about that? I don't believe that Antifa should be going around and smashing things and attacking people for their ideology. But they view themselves much the same as John Brown. And in their districts, in their areas, they painted Black Lives Matter on the ground. They stole taxpayer funds to do it. The police in New York City protected this. It's alarming. What do you do? It doesn't matter whether you support or oppose BLM. That's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is there is a growing sentiment among a large group of people that they're correct and justified in doing what they do. And another faction that they're not. And that's all that matters. The growing escalation. I have this Wikipedia article. This is the control of Republican legislatures. This is control of states by party. 30 states are Republican. 17 are Democrat. 34 states are needed for a convention of states that will dramatically change things. In the timeline of events, one of the most important points they bring up is that Democrats controlled the legislatures of the states that would eventually go on to become the Confederacy. So we are seeing similarities, and there's a lot more. There's a lot of similarities and worrying parallels. It doesn't mean we're guaranteed to enter a civil war. I'm just looking at history, and maybe it's wrong. Maybe it doesn't add up. I said earlier today, maybe what happens is despotic government, and you just end up with an empirical type government with a violation of your rights and people being locked up for dissenting. You know, it happened in 1861. I take you back in time, my friends. May 27th, 1861, President Lincoln's suspension of habeas corpus is challenged. So basically, In April, Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus between Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia to give military authorities the power to silence dissenters and rebels. See, the issue was Maryland was a slave state, and it's north of D.C. D.C. was cut off from the north. So they had no choice. If they wanted to survive, they needed to seize Maryland. So when military resources were trying to move from the north to D.C., riots would break out. Maryland is a southern state, and they did not like the Union. And many of the people here was split between secession and support for the Union. So when the fighting broke out, Lincoln was like, all right, that's it. We're going to arrest all of you without charge or trial. Without charge or trial. Holding these people. Well, Chief Justice Robert B. Taney issues ex parte Merriman, challenging the authority, ultimately saying they had to release John Merriman, a vocal secessionist. He was being held without charge or trial. Ultimately, he was released, posted bond, and he never went to trial because the war broke out and then it ended. And 2 years later, the charges were just dismissed. But Abraham Lincoln said, your right to a trial is forfeit because desperate times call for desperate measures. Do you think that can't happen now? Do you think we won't see someone say the same thing and justify taking these actions? Donald Trump would not deploy the military to shut down the riots. It's like, I don't have the right to do that. I can't do it. Democrats have no problem going and rounding up people across the country. They will not arrest the people in front of the Supreme Court justices' homes. They let the crimes continue. Here's a paper from umbc.edu. The arrest of the Maryland legislature. It's truly a scary story. On August 7th, the General Assembly adjourned, intending to meet again on September 17th. However, on that day, federal troops and Baltimore police officers arrived in Frederick with orders to arrest the pro-Confederate members of the General Assembly. Thus, the special session in Frederick ended, as did Frederick's summer as the state capital, as Maryland found itself inexorably drawn further and further into the heart of the bloodiest war in American history. I'll mention that again. They say, if Maryland seceded, D.C. would be surrounded by hostile states. It came to a head on April 19th, 1861, when soldiers from the 6th Massachusetts Volunteers moving through Baltimore on its way to Washington were attacked by a Southern mob. They met on April 22nd. And as we can see, on August 7th, they were supposed to, they adjourned. They were supposed to meet on the 17th. However, on that day, on September 17th, they arrested the legislature. All right, let's go back to the Wikipedia entry for the Civil War there, the timeline. And we come down to the election to the Battle of Fort Sumter. It was early 1861 when all of this broke out. The Confederacy had already existed, and they began to arrest members of Maryland's legislature, of the General Assembly. Maryland ultimately sided with the North, partly because of this. Do you think that won't happen? We are right now seeing the feds and the DOJ going after the Republican chairman, members of the Republican Party, former government officials, Peter Navarro, a Trump administration official, Steve Bannon. The government is going after the dissenters. Do you think that this results in the Trump supporters being like, guess I'll stop believing what I believe and I'll just support the government in all their actions? Or do you think it terrifies people, shocks the system, shatters confidence, and exacerbates the crisis? Because I think it makes things worse. If you look to the timeline of the Civil War, you don't see these things resulting in things getting better. When they talk about John Brown, the hanging of John Brown did not result in tensions de-escalating. All of these things contributed to the escalation. The arrest, the battle at Fort Sumter, all of these things continually just freaked people out and made it all worse. But maybe there was no solution. I don't know. Here we go. DOJ releases a statement that they respectfully disagree with the SCOTUS ruling on the New York gun law. saying they remain committed to saving innocent lives and defending federal firearms laws. Sure, but this was about a New York law, so this may be a meaningless statement. But there is a concern, the DOJ breaking with the Supreme Court. Eventually, we could see more of this, which does result in the escalation into some kind of civil war. A law gets passed. The federal government is at odds with that law. We saw that in the first Civil War. Not repeating, but rhyming. Here's one. Nina Turner. Oh, Nina. Nina Turner is, former Ohio State professor. You may have heard of her. Why is the court allowed to rule on anything when one of the judges is married to a person who tried to overthrow the U.S. government, and two other judges were appointed by a man who tried to overthrow the U.S. government? Okay, whatever. I don't care what your opinion is on Nina Turner. She's basically calling for some kind of nullification based on political issues. Sure, here's Keith Olbermann, who tweeted, "It has become necessary to dissolve the Supreme Court of the United States. The first step is for a state the court has now forced guns upon to ignore this ruling." Great, you're a court. Why and how do you think you can enforce your rulings? Ignore the court. That's right. That's how it goes. The Supreme Court knows they have no enforcement capabilities. They simply say it, and it's amazing. We agree to it. Seriously. New York is supposed to abide by a new by a new ruling from the Supreme Court, striking down their law requiring a reason to get a concealed carry permit. What if New York just says, we're going to do it anyway? That's when everything breaks. When people realize the Supreme Court can do nothing. Nothing. What can they do? They can do nothing. If New York defies the Supreme Court, what are they going to do? Is Kavanaugh going to go there and bang pots and pans? Are marshals going to go? Not going to happen. Carrie Lake, excuse me, said that when she is elected governor, running in, she's Arizona, I believe. Man, I could be wrong. Sorry, Carrie. But she said she'll ignore unconstitutional gun laws and said, what are the feds going to do? Come down and arrest her? She's right. What will they do? Nothing. If the court is ignored by New York, nothing will be done. We saw this pre-Civil War. There were laws on the books, the Fugitive Slave Act, and when the North said, we ain't doing it, the federal government did nothing. And so the South said, we out. Already, California ignores federal law. Already. On immigration. So what if they just start ignoring the Supreme Court as well? I think it's likely that's where we're going to go. Charlie Spearing says Joe Biden is not happy with the Supreme Court ruling on guns. The ruling contradicts both common sense and the Constitution. Yeah, okay, Joe. It doesn't, but whatever. From the Daily Mail. Senate votes 65-34 to break GOP filibuster, clearing the passage for bipartisan gun control package. Yeah, I feel like this country is going to get ripped apart, to be honest. And then we have this story. It's not super related, but I think it's interesting. Trust linked to Bill Gates is asked by North Dakota AG to explain how it got 2,000 acres of land worth $13.5 million near Canadian border when the state law puts limits on who can own ranches. This one's not really related, but I did think it was interesting just to bring up. Something's happening. We had Dennis Prager on the show last week, and I believe Dennis is 74. I'm 36, so he's more than twice my age. I ask the older guests we have you ever seen it this bad? And they say no. They say no. People like to point out the Weather Underground, they were fringe. They were fringe. Yeah, they were bad. They were crazy, but they were fringe. Right now, we have Antifa. They went out and engaged in some of the worst riots. These far leftists are in violation of the law. The AG won't go after them. But the feds are raiding Republicans. A Republican is going to sit back and be like, guess I'll go to jail. Well, that's where you're going. I don't know what's going to happen in 2023 or 2024. It's possible that with the red wave, Republicans win, but what are they going to do? They're going to do nothing. They're going to sit on their hands. Maybe you get the Senate, you get the House, you get the presidency. Maybe Trump wins again, and then all this shuts down. But I don't see it. I see Joe Biden as Buchanan. Funny thing is, Buchanan was pro-slavery. Joe Biden is probably on the losing side of history. He wasn't voted in. He was voted in, I should say, he was voted in through hatred of Trump, not through support for his plans. So he's not popular enough to beat Trump. Not again, especially with gas prices and the economy. If Trump wins this time, I believe before Trump even gets in, Democrats are going to lose their minds and they are going to take very irrational actions. I wonder if the feds will go after Trump long before he even has a chance. The Southern District of New York will go after Trump before he even gets a chance. What do you do? One possibility, I suppose, Ron DeSantis ends up being the one to win and then issues a pardon on Trump. Shuts it all down. I like Ron DeSantis, and I think he's a rising star in politics, and he may actually be the candidate. But the Democrats know they can't run against him and win. They'll lose. He's too popular. He may be worse than Trump in a lot of ways because he's got the plan, but not the problems. So it's hard to know exactly what they'll do. Maybe they want Donald Trump to run, but they want to make him look really, really bad. So they go after his underlings. They go after the GOP, let Trump win, and then try and defeat him that way. But I don't think they can beat him. In which case, their only option is criminal prosecution. Well, I suppose Washington Post says they can try and disqualify him. That's not been working. If they do disqualify him, they get Ron DeSantis. So it's hard to know exactly how things will play out. Wish I was psychic, but I'm not. It just looks to me every single day when you see this stuff, we're escalating towards civil war. If I were to tell you, I know I do this a similar analogy, but again, if I were to go back to 2018 and said, mark my words, in 4 years, the federal government under the Democrats will be arresting Republicans, you'd say that's insane. In fact, many pundits said it. They said they will start going after Republicans. They have. Peter Navarro was shackled. It's remarkable, isn't it? People didn't believe it. Here we go. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.